Welcome to Relay Chain, a podcast produced by Parity Technologies where we discuss all things substrates, Polkadot, and Web3. This is part 2 of a 2-part episode with Ruitao and Antonia. In the last episode, we talked about the DeFi ecosystem in Ethereum and Polkadot and their suite of protocols under Laminar. In this episode, we're going to talk about the Acala Network, their stablecoin, and how they made a sustainable parachain and a decentralized sovereign wealth fund. Let's get into Acala, which is your stablecoin protocol. And in your white paper, you have 2 protocols within this. There's Hanzon and Homa. So can we start with Hanzon? And like you had mentioned at the end of the last parts about the difference with MakerDAO. And so how is the Acala stablecoin different from Maker?
So the Hanzon protocol is part of the Acala offering, right? And it's like the characterized stablecoin protocol. It's pretty much a long protocol that you can just take a long position against any solid or valuable crypto asset that's available on the Polkadot network. So it's a MakerDAO inspired model, but we have some very unique, different offering to the MakerDAO model. So pretty much one thing that we notice with the MakerDAO design is that the liquidation process is somehow needs some sort of need some improvement. So in the MakerDAO model, there's like 2 set of order book, if I phrase that correctly. So there's this always market that people is able to buy DAI for exchange DAI for Ethereum or exchange Ethereum for DAI. But the actual auction process or the liquidation process runs in a different ways. It's like it offers risky position, auction those ETH for DAI in a different way. So those is that we can see that in our opinion, those like 2 set of liquidity in one protocol, which is not the very optimal design. So in our design, we actually have a built-in decentralized exchange as the final shot of defense for risky liquidations. So think about if a risky position is going to happen on the Acala network, we'll go through the auction process. And if no one bids, or if there's some reason that the bid didn't went through, then we'll use the liquidity in the decentralized exchange that we built in to as the ultimate source of liquidating those risky position. That will be like much safer in terms of like risky positions, and it also source all the liquidity into one places. So the other design that will be unique, different from MakerDAO is because we are deploying this Acala parachain as a shard in the Polkadot network. We can pretty much customize everything, right? And one thing we will definitely customize from day one is that we want the transaction fee to be payable in our version of DAI. And our version of DAI is called AUSD. That means that if you have an account on the Acala parachain and you have some short of AUSD, you can already transfer those AUSD and those fees will be payable in AUSD, so you don't have to have another native token to pay with. The better is that, even better, we will start to think about, hey, if you hold enough AUSD, it seems like that you already have some sort of stake on the network. We can probably offer you some sort of free transfer per day as like for having some stake on the network. As long as you can prove that it's safe, it's not going to congesting the network, we can have this sort of flexibility in offering this sort of convenience for large stakeholders. So those is the thing we start to think about, like reducing the barrier to entry, reducing this counterintuitive fee mechanisms. And ultimately, what we want to see is that this is a parachain and this is a set of protocol that we come up with. And on top of that, you can start to develop your own solution on the Acala parachain. Because think about that. This is like a parachain. It also have the smart contract capability. People can deploy ink contract into our parachain. They don't have to worry about getting a parachain lease. They don't have to worry about getting a parashred. And we're able to support that. And pretty much support it in a way that's very flexible. Right.
Yeah, so it still allows users to deploy, say, like custom logic to interact with AUSD and the ACA token.
Yes. So what we're thinking about right now is that we're gonna go through and with the most complicated foundation layer, right? So there would be like the stablecoin, the CDB process, the staking process, and the parachain, the security of everything, and it will be like a solid ground for people to develop additional stuff on top of that.
Yeah, so and then if we go into Homa, and this kind of is related to what you were saying earlier about how your funds can do more than one thing, like they're not just bound to one thing. Can you describe Homa and like how that works?
Yeah, actually, like the Homa is a necessity rather than a luxury in our protocol design. It's not like, hey, your money could be in both places, but in these cases, your money have to be in both places for this protocol to make sense. So if we think about Ethereum right now, so Ethereum itself currently has only like the store of value, because it cannot be used for staking, at least not now. So it's perfectly okay for some Ether holder to lock in the Ethereum into the Maker contract and then to take out a loan and draw some DAI. That's perfectly fine. But if you think about that, hey, in the upcoming proof of stake network, if you do that, then let's take DOT as an example, right? If a DOT holder wants to lock in some DOT and take out a loan of some AUSD, we are essentially competing for the staking yield. So because as a DOT holder, you might want to stake your DOT and getting some return of your DOT as the staking yield.
Yeah,
right?
I've heard this. I've heard like the staking yield as like the risk-free rate of return in blockchain.
Yeah, so this is like something that every DOT holder would try to gain, right? But if we simply ask DOT holder to lock in their DOT and take out a loan, that we're competing for that, and we don't want to see that happening. The good thing is that because this is the blockchain world, your money can be in a lot of different places. So we come up with the Homa protocol, allow you to stake your DOT through the protocol in a trustless way, so you will get a receipt of your stake DOT back. So if you think about that, the DOT stakes through our protocol, you will get an L DOT back. The L DOT is short for liquid DOT. That means that you have liquidity. You don't have to unstake it. You can transfer it to anywhere, and it's as good as the original stake DOT. And also, it's like the interest bearing of DOT, right? If you hold L DOT, you will hold the staking yield, and the L DOT is again can be used as a character to lock into the Homa protocol and draw a loan out. So those is like one. That's why I call it a necessity rather than luxury. By having the Homa protocol, we avoid the competition of like the DOT holder, like they have to choose: do they want to stake or do they want to lock in their DOT? They could do both.
So like this is one of the most interesting ideas to me that I've heard about, and like I first heard about it last August or September, but a decentralized sovereign wealth fund where a blockchain can actually like take positions in other blockchain tokens, which is a completely new thing. So Ruitao, like maybe you can explain like a high level, what is a sovereign wealth fund, and then like what is a decentralized sovereign wealth fund, and then we'll go into more of the specifics of how this works.
Okay, so I mean, what's a sovereign wealth fund? Maybe we will use one of the most successful sovereign wealth fund as an example. Maybe look at Norway's fund, right? So Norway hosts the largest fund, the largest sovereign wealth fund, and maybe the best performing sovereign wealth fund in the world. What it does is that it's basically pretty much secure assets and invest on behalf of its citizens. So it has a diversity set of portfolios, invest in very solid company, has a very solid portfolio across the globe. And whatever that's generated through that sovereign wealth fund will be benefit for all of its citizens. And if we think about the blockchain world, if we think about blockchain as like its own jurisdiction, as its own digital sovereign nations, then if we think about each protocol as a tiny country, we will start to think, hey, can we operate this protocol in a way that like we operate in a country, in a decentralized way? There's a lot of question to ask that how can a project sustain and survive after this project or this decentralized protocol use all its funds that it raised, how it can continue to survive and how it continue to evolve and scale. And that's one of the challenges that we need to solve when we were designing the Acala stablecoin. So we come up with this sovereign wealth fund idea is that thinking about MakerDAO right now, as an example, all the token of the MKR token, all the profit are being used to buy back MKR token and burn them. on the Polkadots, when we're designing the Acala stablecoin, we think about, hey, other than burning those tokens, is there a better way that we can come up with to utilize those profits and maybe build up wealth in the protocol? So we think about that when we come up with an idea. Hey, can we just use this profit to buy DOT? Because DOT has utility, has yield, enable access to this particular network, right? So after some research, we concluded that DOT is probably one of the assets that this protocol should own. It has a set of benefit for the protocol to own this asset. And we foresee in the future there might be additional asset that this protocol can also own. But for now, our primary focus for our digital sovereign fund is to hold enough DOT to secure a parachain slot by itself. I'll probably let Antonia to describe the detail of how it works and why we need it to sustain this network.
Yeah, so like Antonia, the paper that you wrote, it details 3 different ways that this sovereign wealth fund can generate revenue. One of them is like the CDP stability fees that get converted to DOTs. Second is the liquidity penalty from defaults. And a third is the LDOT returns and fees. So can you just kind of go over each one and talk about like how those end up with revenue for the sovereign wealth fund?
Yeah, sure. As you could say that, we need to use the system income surplus to support the fund. So there are 3 main sources we're going to use. First of all, the realized stability fee. So it's not all the stability fee in our first plan, but we actually have planned to use, to include the unrealized in the future as well. So the realized stability fee is when someone closes their CDP. So the stability fee now comes realized on the book. And instead of the original design, we thought about is pretty close to what MakerDAO were doing, is like to buy back for say, ask people to pay either in USD or other, SAA, but at the end we'll get SAA back and burn them. But then we think about how do we build up the network itself to make the network, stronger and self-sustainable rather than just only think about the value of the native token. So we come to the idea of why don't we, exchange for DOT and holding DOT as a foreign reserve. Because in the common word, foreign reserve would be a foreign currency, but now like a foreign cryptocurrency reserve. So all the income from the stability fee gonna be exchanged for DOTs and to be held by the fund. Well, on the other side, if you look at the data, since, we're not online yet, but if you look at the revenue analysis of MakerDAO, you could see there's quite a proportion of unrealized stability fee accumulated because the CDP holder haven't closed them. And we also thought about another way to how to, probably we could issue decentralized bond so that we could also capitalize that part of the unrealized stability fee before the closure of the CDP to use it to buy DOT. The other one is the liquidation penalty of the risky CDP. So that's also another income of the Hong protocol. We will be using that part of the system surplus to buy DOT, to be held by the fund. Because, our goal, as Ray has said, the primary goal is to collect as much DOT as possible owned by the Acala protocol itself, so that we could use it to, lease parachain in the future to become self-sustainable. And another, third income is the protocol fee of the AirDot, is the Homa protocol of the Acala Network. Because when people, deposit their DOTs for exchange of LDOTs, to take advantage of our, liquidity of the DOT. So we charge a small protocol fee on top of that. So that part of the income of the whole Acala network will contribute to our fund as well. So yeah, that's the main 3 fund. And from that, we could, we also had an analysis and we could see that, once we receive those dots, we will be reinvesting all the dots we collected through the Homa system. That means we're staking them to Polkadot and receive, Polkadot staking rewards, so that our dot reserve, which is the foreign cryptocurrency reserve held by the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Decentralized DSWS fund, you can think about as a way of the fund will grow compoundly.
Yeah, so I think like the foreign, like talking about it as like dots as a foreign currency, which is interesting because like a dot and say like the Acala chain are both in the same network. Would you say like a good analogy to that would be like two different countries that have different currencies, but they're operating under like some shared agreement, like within the European Union or NATO or some other framework where they have some like primitives where they can work together and each country can be sovereign, but they can still own each other's currency and have these guarantees.
Yeah, it's quite a similar idea, but the better part of it compared to traditional currency is because think about DOT not only has a value and has its own yield, a stable yield, in terms of being staked, as well as it has, the most special part is the utility access. Owning DOT giving you the possibility to support a parachain lease. So that means for, in another sense, for a project like us, or for Acala, owning DOTs would giving Acala the access to parachain. So that once Acala has enough DOTs, its own DOTs through our own, decentralized sovereign, wealth fund, we could become self-sustainable rather than, running another IPO and asking other people to help and, to lease the parachain together.
So like phase one of a sovereign wealth fund is just going to be like the most basic objectives for a wealth fund, which is just to increase in value. And then it sounds like phase two is to actually make this ecosystem or make this chain self-sustainable so that you can lease the parachain slot with just using the wealth fund from the chain. What do you imagine like the future looks like when you have a parachain slot secured, but you're still running this sovereign wealth fund? What else do you hope to achieve by using this?
First of all, as you say, our primary goal is to lease a parachain slot independently. So we have actually run a very simple and conservative numeric example. And through that, we could see, if we do it good enough, after 2 years of running, because our project, goal was to lease our first parachain for 2 years in the first round, we might be able to lease our own parachain in the third year of the project, which is the second round of our parachain lease. So if we were able to do that, we'll become completely self-sustainable and we could run independently. We could, all the fund we collected, we build it, we'll be able to, go back, be invested back to the protocol. And there are a lot of amazing things we could do. Ray, do you want to talk a little bit about that high-level thing?
Yeah. So I think there's once we achieve the primary objective is that this protocol accumulated enough dots for itself to become self-sustainable and able to bound a parachain for itself, we can see a lot of possibility happening. First is that if at that stage there's other asset that's valuable enough for this protocol to hold, then we will seek for that. And there will be a governance through the token holders governance. The token holder will decide which additional asset the Acala network should continue to hold to increase position or to build up a portfolio. I'm just using some example here. Let's foresee that in the future there will be another token. I'm just using the Oracle example that we talked about earlier. That if this particular Oracle protocol has this sort of utility access token, that if you have enough of it, you can gain access for this particular set of Oracle service for a particular amount of queries per period, then it will be advantage for the Acala protocol to hold this Oracle service token as well on behalf of the Acala's holder. So the Acala protocol can gain access to additional service other than just getting the parachain access. It can get access to Oracle service. It can get access to like on-ramp, off-ramp service. I'm just using an example. So those is the one direction that we can go to once the Acala sovereign wealth fund finish its primary objective. The other way we can go is that we can still to hold on onto DOT and to hold additional DOTs, because we know that DOT as yield, right? And if DOT at that stage was proven to be a solid asset, the protocol itself can continue to hold to additional profit in terms of DOT. And because those DOTs can then to generate yield, then it can become a fund to support the development of this network, to continue to support this development of this network. So that's another way that we can another approach that we can take. I think the possibility is endless. We are just guessing some possibility right now, but I think maybe 2 years later, there'll be a lot more utility for this protocol to own.
Yeah, and that is actually kind of like a good way to wrap up this like sovereign wealth fund. Is just like, so we talked at the very beginning about how, you know, your money is not just money anymore, and it can be serving multiple functions that are multiple financial functions, but also other functions. And so when we talk about like having a fund and multiple chains here like Acala and Flow, what do you think the future looks like where people are using these tokens for like governance decisions, for perhaps voting on like the actual Polkadot protocol with the dots that are staked or bonded behind the parachain lease, governance of the chains themselves, staking, the management of the wealth fund? How do all these things come together, and like what do you think it looks like for the actual token holders?
Well, I think this is a very interesting question. So if we talk about how do you actually govern this, there's a whole set of science or a whole set of studies needed to find out which is the optimal way to governance a particular protocol or to governance a particular referendum. I think if we need to talk about this project, we are not actually in the blockchain space anymore. We're talking about building a digital nation with all the token holder being citizens. And if you think all the token holder are citizens, there's a number of ways that you can run an election, right? And there's currently a lot of way to run an election in the world. There's like, if you look at United States, there's like those first past the poll, which is, in my opinion, horrible. And in New Zealand here, we have the MMP system, which allow you to vote with some minorities still being represented in the parliament. There's also talk about like the single transferable vote being one of the more optimal way to represent the actual interests of the token holders. But what we start to think right now is that, I mean, as civilization come to these years, I mean, the tool that we have from the old age, like this voting, this ballot things, those are really outdated. In the blockchain world, like this rule or this voting system can be implemented and can be updated, can be evolving in the real time. So instead of me talking about how do you think like this token holder can start to govern these protocols, I mean, our idea is that we're going to come up with what we call a progressive decentralization or a progressive democratic process. So initially, because we are the builder of this network, we will have a great deal of influence on how the direction this network is gonna be, how do we gonna steer this network. But the more user, the more trader, the more holder get into this network, we would like to slowly losing our control and ultimately completely lose our control, and it become like truly owned by the holders. And how do we get those holders to participate and to join and to have a scientific governance process? I mean, we have some idea, but I'm pretty sure that's not the optimal solution right now. We can't actually think about it right today. I mean, we'll probably have some sort of similar council voting, similar to what Polkadot is currently proposing. But I'm pretty sure those will evolve as the day goes by. And the good thing about this substrate and the Polkadot code base is that this whole governance process is on-chain and can be upgraded as long as the previous governance process allow that to happen. So what we will see is that other than us sticking to one rule, we will see our rule evolving and reflecting in a way that's in almost real time to find out the most optimal way for holders to participate and to actually own this network. And that's, I think, is very interesting. I really would like to echo what Gavin said in the Ready Layer 1 talk like a few days ago. He said that now there was sword, and now there's like pen, which is more powerful than a sword. And now this keyboard is more powerful than pen. I really believe that is the case. The future belongs to the nerds, the coders.
Yeah, and I think like what we're talking about here is like a digital society, and it's turning out to have a lot of the same questions that normal societies have, but we finally have the digital tools to like actually, I would say, make a first attempt at answering them.
Yeah, I think if you look at all the sectors that has been revolutionized by the technology, by the internet, by computer, pretty much all of the sector has been wiped out and been revolutionized by the computers. But there's a number of sectors that's still very, very old or very, very old age. So if you look at the finance sector, they have been like there for 100 or 200 years. There's no fundamental change to it. It's not impacted by the technology changes. The same with the governance, like the election process, how you run a country, how you run the voting process. Those is still we are using like very, very legacy technology. And I think the time is right for this sort of disruption in this old sector as well.
The last question, how do you see people, so you're building a lot. I mean, like 3 different protocols on Laminar, and then 2 protocols on Acala, a decentralized sovereign wealth fund. And then we're talking about like existing within Polkadot, where there's lots of other applications. And we've talked a little bit about like, having an identity and an oracle. How do you see people using like this like whole suite of protocols that you're designing?
Well, I think this is a very good question. We believe that we are in a very early stage of this decentralization movement, and every one of us is actually companion rather than competitors. So we do believe that because money itself is programmable on the blockchain already, and all the protocol is open and interconnectable, we think that given enough time, all this protocol will find a way that they will work seamlessly. And that's especially true on the Polkadot ecosystem, right? You have all these different shards. They all have their different mechanism design. They all have their different token economic, but they are all connected to the relay chain. And if we can find out some sort of like standards between different shards, value can flow seamlessly into different shards. And that's actually what we are pushing for as well. So the number of teams that have been working with us on the Polkadot ecospace, we are starting to try to form if we can have a draft proposal for like a universal token standard in the Polkadot ecosystem, so we can have like the asset or the value being defined as an interface. So that's one thing that we are working with. There's a lot of interest in this area. There's a number of teams that express interest in working for such standard with us already. The other stuff is that we can see a lot of other teams that's building on Polkadot, and they have some very unique offering. And it's like the synergy that they are able to create is bigger than what they would otherwise stay alone. So one of the network they've been working very closely is the Acala Network. They are a privacy substrate-based solution, and they are aiming to become a parachain as well. So we're talking about that. Hey, if you are working focus on privacy, and what we are working is focused on stablecoin. Maybe if we work together, we can have a privacy stablecoin. Think about that. And the value that we are able to bring to both parachain is way more than if we work alone. If you think about that, hey, you can have like Zcash running on top of Ethereum. That kind of cool, right?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I think we'll end it there. Where should people go to follow Acala and Laminar?
Yeah, we are both active on Twitter. So there's like Acala Network at Twitter, and there's Laminar Protocol at Twitter. And I think if I recall correctly, most of the listeners to this podcast, they are builders, they are coders. I think the best place to follow us is on GitHub. So we are very, very active on GitHub. We have a set of wikis, we have a set of documents, and of course we accept the full project repository is on GitHub. So maybe the best place to follow us is on GitHub.
Okay, great. Thanks, Antonia and Ruitao, for coming on today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Relay Chain. We'd love to keep in touch. Follow us on Twitter at RelayChain or email podcast@parity.io. Our team at Parity includes some of the leading peer-to-peer networking developers, consensus algorithm inventors, blockchain innovators, and Rust developers. If you want to learn more about our work or want to work with us, visit our website at parity.io and sign up for our newsletter at parity.io/newsletter.